Good evening, and welcome to the February 12th, 2024 meeting of the Select Board. Could you please join me in a Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. Okay, we have several public service announcements this evening. Virginia?
Okay, first up, sponsored by the Chelmsford Health Department, they are offering another session on free Narcan training, where you'll learn how to recognize an overdose and what to do about it. The training will be February 13th from 6 to 6:30 p.m. at the Chelmsford Town Hall Fire Training Room. You can register by calling Taryn or Darcy at the Health Department at 978-250-5241 or email Taryn at tangel, A-N-G-E-L, at chelmsfordma.gov. Next up, we have another forum sponsored by the Chelmsford Health Department in their Let's Talk About Mental Health series. This one features guests named Wes, who will be talking about changing minds with stories over stigma. Wes is a mental health advocate, and he will discuss his journey with mental health and how he became his own hero. The forum will be held Tuesday, February 20th from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. at the Chelmsford Public Library. And you can scan the QR code that's on the announcement for more information and to register. And also provided by the Chelmsford Health Department, they will be holding a session on health first aid training for youth mental wellness. And youth mental health first aid is a training that teaches adults how to identify, understand, and respond to signs of mental health and substance use challenges among children and adolescents from ages 12 to 18. The session will be held on February 22nd from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the Chelmsford Town Hall in the Fire Training Room. And to register, you can contact Taryn Angel at the Health Department at 978-250-5241 or email at tangel@chelmsfordma.gov. And next up, we have an announcement by the Northern Middlesex Council of Governments for the Greater Lowell Vision Zero Public Forum number 1. This is a grant that they received to look at traffic issues and work towards eliminating traffic deaths and life-changing injuries in the Greater Lowell region. The Vision Zero Forum will be held from 6 to 8 p.m. on February 27th. There is a link that you can visit to register for the event, and that is in the flyer. I'm not going to read it. It's fairly long. You can also go to www.nimcog.org/gvision0 for more information. GL Vision Zero, excuse me. And next up, we don't have a flyer for it, but the school committee will be holding a budget hearing on February 27th at 6 o'clock at the school administration offices. And if you look on their website, there is also a link to the full budget for which they will be having the hearing. Next up is an announcement for calls for proposals or expressions of interest for the Coolest Farm Task Force. The task force is looking for expressions of interest for the Coolest Farm parcels that were recently purchased by the town at and around 185 Pound Hill Road. Suitable uses include open space, which would be trails and recreation and things like that, or agricultural, farming and gardens, and other activities related to benefiting the town and its residents. The public session will be on Wednesday, March 6th at the Chelmsford Town offices right here in room 204 at 7 p.m. If possible, the task force would like you to send written proposals ahead of the meeting. You can email them to coulisfarm@chelmsfordma.gov, and you'll also have the opportunity to make a brief presentation of around 5 minutes or less at that meeting. There are more details in the announcement flyer in terms of specifically what you should provide in your proposals. And next up, we have some announcements related to the election. The presidential primary election will be held on March 5th, 2024, from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. at your respective polling locations. The deadline to request a ballot to vote by mail is 5 p.m. February 27th, and early voting will take place in person at the town offices gymnasium from February 24th to March 1st. And the times are listed in the flyer. It will be Saturday and Sunday from 1 to 5, and then Monday through Thursday, Monday 8:30 to 4, Tuesday 8:30 to 7, Wednesday and Thursday 8:30 to 4, and Friday 8:30 to 1. You can also visit voteinma.com to check your voter status and find your polling location. And that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, next up is public input. Is there anybody here that would like to speak to the board about anything this evening? And just so a note, if you hear about the 40B proposal on Crosby Lane, we'll have input from the department heads and boards and committees, and we'll have some time for public input during that time. So if it's for anything else, you're welcome to come up to the podium now to speak to us. This one.
My name's Brian
And
Latina.
just before you start, Brian, I just want to remind you, there's a time limit, 3 minutes. I'll give you a minute notice because you seem to have a hard time with clocks.
Yeah, that actually is my first topic. I'm going to read to you the First Amendment of the United States Constitution just quickly here. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the freedom of speech or free exercise thereof, or abridging, keyword, the freedom of speech or the press or the right of people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. We have a 3-minute rule on my ability to speak to you. I'm a town meeting rep for almost 30 years. This is fairly new. It started around the time of COVID. We changed terms and words all throughout our governance, every place, seems to me. Changed our Board of Selectmen that was around for 200 years to the Select Board to be proper in speech and all. The First Amendment promises that the government shall not prohibit or abridge the freedom of speech, which includes speech that's considered offensive and hateful. The Supreme Court of Massachusetts just ruled on that recently. Someone on a select board told someone they couldn't speak because they were using terms they didn't like. That was flipped over on its back and changed. So I'd like to reconsider the 3-minute rule. It limits me in my ability to communicate with my government. If you look at our town charter, the town is the residents. The select board actually is subservient to that. The town manager works for you. You work for the town, the residents, not the other way around. So I'll go quickly over the 3 topics, and I'd love that extra minute if you give it to me.
I didn't say an extra minute. I said I'll let you know when you have 1 minute left.
1 minute, the fourth minute, if you will.
No, I would just, you're losing your time right now, so you should speak.
That's right. So I would limit it, and please don't don't interrupt me as we go so that I don't lose the time. Excise taxes. I drove through a new apartment complex on Turnpike, and I mentioned after my 3 minutes ran out last week, I don't know if people heard me, there were 12 non-Massachusetts plated vehicles, New Hampshire, Virginia, New York, and Pennsylvania in there this evening when I drove through. At the rate that Massachusetts charged me, and I just paid my excise taxes downstairs earlier today, properly so at 0.025 cents per thousand, $60, $80, something like that each
You have
car.
1 minute left.
At 0.025 and the average Massachusetts value of a car is $36,000. We just lost $10,800 that I paid on behalf of those people that moved into what used to be 9 acres of forest. That needs to change. We need to go chase those down. I did get a document that allows me as a citizen to go chase those down. That shouldn't be my job. 65 voters in our last town election were disenfranchised. Their votes didn't count because the ballots came in too late. 65 voters voted, but their votes were piled in a pile and set aside. Anyone who would like to know who they are, I have a list of those. I did a Freedom of Information Act.
Brian, I'm sorry, you're going to have to save your next one for next meeting.
Okay.
It's your 3 minutes.
In conclusion, if I might,
10 seconds.
our select board was determined by one vote last election. So keep in mind, if you want to vote, bring your ballots in early. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Harrington?
John Harrington. I just have a couple issues. One, the business community or the business association is a little concerned. We're seeing a lot of neon signs and illegal signage out there. And when the town starts to enforce this, the businesses are going to get hurt. They're buying these signage and so forth. Granted, during COVID, everything was relaxed. But now you're seeing more and more of this happening. And when the town does lay the law down on them, some people are going to lose some money, purchasing all the signage. So I kind of hope maybe the town would start, letting these businesses know what they're doing is illegal and take care of it. As far as, I know we don't have a sign advisory committee anymore, but we have a building inspector. I believe that's his job. I know he's very busy. However, that's if the community starts looking like it used to look years ago, nobody will like it at all. So enforcement on the signs, again, follow the bylaw, and secondly, it would be good for all businesses. If you recall, Pat, we went before town meeting to get one sign saying open. That's what the business association, we made a deal with the town. That's all we want. We don't need a ton of signage, neon signs, especially in the window, or A-frames. Occasionally, if it's a business that's just opening, we know that's relaxed to help that business. But however, after they're open for a while, A-frames should be removed. So that's a comment that we'd like you to enforce. Secondly, and correct me if I'm wrong, Pat, you're going to make a policy on licenses as far as not giving a 2-week.
It's not going to be required.
Well,
We still always have,
Good discussion and public input.
okay, Virginia just reminded, we will be speaking about that later in the agenda, but we will
want me to
make,
wait till later?
well, you can make your case now and we'll talk about it. We will talk about it up here when we get to
Well,
that.
basically, the 2 weeks were put in years ago when there was a situation in town where a fellow was getting a license. He had the votes back in those days. The votes were already known, and they had a 2-week notice, and when the night he's going to get the license, the neighborhood showed up, and they complained immensely about how he operated his business, as far as selling cigarettes to kids, etc., and so forth. With that being said, the board voted down on him. They would not award that license. There's one example. I don't feel that, personally, a candidate's coming in here asking this board, I'd like a license. There shouldn't be any debate that he's complaining you're waiting 2 weeks. Does that candidate go down to the ABCC and say, hey, I got something to do. Give me my license. My problem is the candidate should not be dictating to your board. The 2-week policy was a good policy. It saved some problems, and it got more votes. I wouldn't say more, but it'd give a week, an extra week or two for the residents to be aware what is going on.
Okay,
And
Mr. Harrington, you've used your 3 minutes.
what's that, Pat?
You've used your 3 minutes.
I used my 3.
You did.
Brian, I used my 3. All right, but you got what I'm talking about. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to take 3 minutes?
No,
Anyone?
no one in the Zoom.
Okay. Okay, next up is committee vacancies.
Okay, we currently have the following committee vacancies. The Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee has 1 3-year term. The Board of Appeals Associate Member has 1 1-year term. The Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee has an unexpired 3-year term available. The Conservation Commission has 1 unexpired 3-year term available. The Commission on Disabilities has 2 unexpired 3-year terms, 1 unexpired 3-year term, and a 3-year term open. The Community Action Program Committee has 1 vacancy. The Council on Aging has an unexpired term and a 3-year term open. The Cultural Council has 2 vacancies. The Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee has 1 vacancy. The Holiday Decorating Committee has 2 unexpired terms open. And the Parade Committee welcomes all applicants for 1-year terms ending July 31st, 2024. The Public Records Advisory Committee has 1 unexpired term open. The Roberts Field Advisory Committee has 2 unexpired 3-year terms open. The Tree Committee has 1 unexpired term open. In addition, the town moderator is seeking candidates to fill 2 unexpired terms on the Finance Committee. One Finance Committee seat is available until June 30th, 2024, and the other is until June 30th, 2026. If you're interested in serving on a town board or committee, please complete an online application available at the town website. And for more information, contact the town manager's office at 978-250-5202 or tmoffice@chelmsfordma.gov.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next up, we're going to have Police Chief Colin Spence talk to us about the Chelmsford Police Department reaccreditation.
Good evening. It's an honor to be before all of you once again tonight. Just want to give you a few quick updates on the police department. As many of you probably know, January 1st, we underwent a reorganization at the police department. We now have a community engagement and wellness division, which is headed by Sergeant Dan Gogan. And we also have a community engagement and social media officer, Aiden Gillis, who works under Dan, Sergeant Gogan. As you have probably noticed, our social media, we've been much more active on social media, and I'm going to get into how that applies to reaccreditation in a second. With various events throughout the town, this division was formed to improve our outreach into the community and address various wellness issues in the town. Also, as part of that department reorganization, we also have a traffic and training division, which is headed by Sergeant Nicholas Zeminski. This division was needed to address one of our number 1 complaints, as all of you know, is traffic. In addition, with all the changes with police reform and training, a division was needed to be dedicated to address these issues. A couple of the most recent events we've had, we've attended several veterans breakfasts last Thursday of the month, where we normally see Select Board Member Wojcik, and also various television shows. We had a hate crime event, hate incidents forum with District Attorney Marion Ryan. We also have Learn to Skate going on now, February 25th, March 3rd, and March 10th, from 3:30 to 4:30. Coffee with a Cop, February 25th at Euphoria, 10 a.m. to 12, and Tip a Cop at the Establishment to benefit the Special Olympics, and that is on March 22nd, Friday, March 22nd. We're also in the process of launching our new website in March. It's going to be very interactive, informative. All of our department policies are going to be updated as part of reaccreditation, put right on the website. We're also going to be working on a history of the police department that will be part of that website. And I want to thank the public for providing us with old pictures. We got pictures from, 1930s, 40s, up till now of all old police incidents, police officers, roll calls. But most importantly, last Wednesday, February 7th, we were awarded our Massachusetts Police Reaccreditation, as you've seen from the letter. This reaccreditation was an outstanding accomplishment for our department and the community as a whole. This process began back in 2010 under Police Chief James Murphy and continued under Police Chief James Spinney. The reaccreditation process is always ongoing, and we're officially reaccredited every 3 years. Commission came to the police station back in November for approximately 3 days. During this process, the Commission conducted a full audit of the police department policies and our processes. In order to become accredited, the police department had to meet 256 mandatory standards and then 79 optional standards. Now, most of the standards reflect critical areas of police management, operations, technical support activities, also mutual aid, collection and preservation of evidence, communications, working conditions, crime analysis, community involvement, and that's why I brought up the new divisions we started, financial management, internal affairs, juvenile operations, patrol administration, training, traffic, drug enforcement, victim witness assistance. Accreditation ensures that our policies reflect modern professional standards in policing. It also ensures our accountability and transparency to our community and among our agency personnel. This reaccreditation further enhances the reputation of our department and promotes public confidence in our agency. It will also ensure that our agency is prepared and properly trained to handle the various calls for service we have. Chelmsford Police Department has always had an agency philosophy of being prepared, and reaccreditation is an important step to that preparedness. I want to thank publicly all our police department employees for their constant support of our department's programs and initiatives. Maintaining reaccreditation is a constant process. Our officers strive to maintain a professional and caring police department. I want to publicly, personally thank Lieutenant Jason Hanscom, who's here with me tonight, for an outstanding job in achieving reaccreditation. Lieutenant Hanscom is not one to seek out praise, but his efforts made this process almost seamless. And I realized that when I went last Wednesday, he had a knowledge of pretty much everybody there because they go to him for help. And I believe you started approximately 10 years ago participating in the reaccreditations, and he's one of the leaders with that group now. So he's a very important asset to the department. Also, our administrative assistant, Missy Nolan, was very important in the process in assisting Lieutenant Hanscom. I would also like to thank the town of Chelmsford, the select board, Town Manager Cohen, for your continued support of the police department achieving this important goal. As I said, this process began years ago. In 2010 is when we first began the process. Thank you very much for having me here tonight, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, any questions for Chief Spence? Congratulations, that's quite an achievement.
We're very happy with it. I mean, it went very smoothly. Probably the smoothest it's gone since we started doing it, and very proud of it. It's a great thing for the community, for all of us. So,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next on our agenda is a National Grid report on double poles. We have,
Yeah, Laura Callagher and Curtis Davis are on the Zoom virtual call. Good evening, Laura. Thank you for your attendance this evening. And good evening, Curtis.
Good evening.
How's it going? Let me see.
Okay,
Let
so
me
if
share my screen.
You can't share. We can see.
Oh,
it.
I can't?
We have it
Okay.
here.
I can put up what you submitted to the board,
Oh,
the
okay.
open tickets, and just
Yep.
let me know what you need.
Okay. So I mean, as far as double polls go, our engines report shows that we currently have 64 open double polls in Chelmsford. We were able to close in January and February 17 polls, and there were another 10 that were created in January and February. The previous report from January does show that we have 7 less double polls overall in the town of Chelmsford.
Okay, so I guess some progress is being made. Do we know what's going to happen going forward?
We're going to continue to work with the different parties that the tickets are assigned to and try and progress those forward.
Okay, I know Paul Cohn, you had mentioned several times about those that were here forever, and I just...
Right, Laura. I know. I know. It seems your meeting was postponed last month because of the weather condition, and I know you're on the cusp of another one tonight. So, again, thank you for your time. But if you recall, at that time when we last met back in December, the discussion became on some of those long-standing items, and you did have some explanation on that on a couple of those, and I think that's sort of the ones that jump out still that are still in National Grid's court, and one was on Princeton Street, one was on Barton Hill Road, and the other one on Long Meadow Road, and I think those are the ones that I think are, and I know there were reasons for some of those, and you provided those at that time. And I'm just sort of wondering, obviously, wintertime's difficult, but how do we progress on ultimately, bringing to closure double polls that go back to 2015 and 2017 or 2000 and, basically the ones that go back many years?
So I know from like our perspective, some of these items in particular, Long Meadow Road is going to take quite a bit of time. That's going to, essentially, we're going to need to dig up the existing electric that runs to the cul-de-sac and rerun all that primary. So that one is going to take quite a bit of work and scheduling in order to get that completed. There was some information that was missing at the time of the initial request. That has come to light. And there was a request from the homeowner, I believe in 2012, to have the original pole removed from their property. So that pole set was completed by Verizon. And unfortunately, that information was not provided to National Grid at the time for the reasoning of why the pole got moved so far from the original location. So I am working with our design team and our engineers to get that progressed, and that needs to go to both our underground department as well as our overhead department in order to get that work completed. For River Neck Road, that pole in particular, that one we were able to get the double pole removed. So that one has been removed. For Princeton Street, I did just send a follow-up to our civil department. They are requesting some additional information for that pole, but they did recently do a walkout to determine getting resources on site to fill the existing holes in the sidewalks and get those sidewalk repairs completed. Once those sidewalk repairs are completed, we can remove that engines ticket. Let's see, pole 84 on Boston Road, that pole was closed. And for pole 2 on Barton Hill Road, I have reached out to our engineering department, and they are working on creating work request to have electric transfers completed at Barton Hill Road. Does that help?
Yeah, that's very helpful because again, those are the ones that jump out are the ones where you see the years ago, and I guess we'll have to chase down Verizon for those that are in their court, which means you've already completed your work, and again, who chases the third party vendors? As you know, there was one from 2017. And the next to go is LTF MA, on River Neck Road. So who chases those people? Because we don't have contacts with those third-party vendors.
So I have contacts with those. I'm in this meeting and I work with Curtis's department because my department works directly with the third-party attachments throughout the state of Massachusetts. So we have meetings weekly with the majority of the third-party attachers that are seeking access to our polls. So one thing that I can do is I can try and push and get these transfers completed, particularly for Chelmsford going forward.
Yeah, they said because we've got one, as I mentioned, for 17, and there was another one from 2015. On Billerica Road, and again, the next to go is TCG MA, so again, those would be helpful because, given that it's going on almost a decade, that sort of gets, people's attention.
Yeah.
And then the ones, I will say, the ones that are in the town's court, we are actively working with that's basically our fiber, and we are working with our vendor to get out there and. But those, again, most of those are fairly recent. That was back from the fall of this year. So even though we're the largest ball in court, those are all concentrated in the recent project on North Road and Billerica Road. And so, again, we'll have those cleared up, as soon as weather permits.
Okay.
So I noticed, there were 10 new ones in January. That seemed like quite a bit to me in 1 month to have 10 new double poles added. I mean, it couldn't, you wouldn't think there'd be that many. Any reason for that? Did that have to do with weather or?
I would imagine that has to do a lot with weather. I know we did have over 200,000 customers that were out of power the week before Christmas. So we did have, I want to say, Curtis, keep me faithful and truth, but I'm pretty sure we had over 200 pole hits and poles that were broken throughout the state of Massachusetts, 200 plus. So we did have to send restoration crews out, and we were on storm duty for, I want to say 7 or 8 days straight. So I would imagine a lot of that, the 10 would have to do with that. It does take a little bit of time for paperwork to catch up from, the storm to getting into the system. So.
Yeah, I guess
Yeah,
go ahead, Curtis.
No, I was just going to reiterate what Laura said. And, the Christmas time storm, as well as the January 7th storm, where we all received a ton of snow with the wet, heavy snow and the high winds. There were definitely plenty of poles that came down during that storm. And so that played a contributing factor to those 10 poles as well.
Okay, because, I think if we had shown 16, 16 that had been cleared and no added, that would be impressive. But because you had the 10 new added, that kind of diminished the progress that was being made. So, I guess if we can anticipate there would be 10 to 12 per month, say, that are removed, to me, that would be significant progress. Do you think that's something that we could count on over the next 3, 4, 6 months?
I don't know that we can necessarily count on that because it's not just National Grid's responsibility for removing pole replacements. So that being said, there's we can work with the people that are attached as well as the joint pole owners. But I cannot guarantee that somebody else is going to complete work when I ask them to complete work.
Okay. All right, I mean, we appreciate you coming in here periodically to give us an update. I think if we could at least receive reports on a monthly basis, I don't know how the other members feel, but I don't know if we need to have them coming in every month as long as we see some steady progress.
Maybe once a quarter, and then
Yeah.
we can see.
Right, so maybe, yeah, if you could provide the reports on a monthly basis, and then maybe if we could see you again, say around March or April, that would, to see how we're doing by then,
Okay.
if that works with you. And, we can get in touch with you to let you know if we need it sooner, if we're regressing rather than progressing.
Yes.
Does that work?
Yes.
I think that's a good idea, and it is this time of year. It's a little bit more busy for us because it's storm season. So if we can regroup, say the April-May timeframe, not only will we be coming off storm season, but it'll also give us an opportunity to provide more of an update and work some of the polls that are in our queue as well. So we appreciate having this discussion and keeping it ongoing with you in the town.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Anybody else have any questions for these folks? Right. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Curtis.
Have a good night.
Nice night.
Okay, next up, we're going to have a discussion about the proposed 40B affordable housing project at 39 North Road and 3 Crosby Lane. I know we have a representative from the applicant here, so we will have a presentation, brief presentation, and then we will take comments from department heads and any committee members that are here, and then after that, some remaining time for public input.
Good evening. I brought some handouts and let's give, I don't know who's the keeper of the electronics. Thank you. And I do have some extras too, if anyone wants.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Madam Chair, members of the board, Mr. Manager, and council, good evening. I don't think I've seen any of you since the new year, so happy new year as well. Douglas DeShane from Finneran and Nicholson representing Crosby Village LLC. As some of you may know, we are in the process of seeking a project eligibility level letter from MHP for the project at 39 North Road and 3 Crosby Lane. And typically in that process, as I understand, what will happen is at some point MHP will send out a letter to the Board of Selectmen requesting your comments and questions regarding the project eligibility level letter. That gives the town an opportunity to submit its thoughts and comments, including those of its departments and boards and commissions. So we're a little early here, meeting at this point, because I don't believe MHP has sent that letter to you yet, but it's soon to be coming, so we've got a head start on the process. So I am here tonight to give you a quick overview of the project and can answer any questions. And of course, once you do get the letter, if you have any additional comments, we're happy to present the information. So I did do a very short presentation here, and if we could, I'll start. Crosby Village, oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. I do have some extras if anyone would like one. So the site at Crosby Village is just under an acre, and what's proposed is to develop a total of 12 units on the site. If we could go to the next slide, please, Paul. So the way we're going to do that, or the way we're proposing to do that, is to preserve the existing, there's an existing 2-unit farmhouse historical duplex on the property. We are proposing to maintain that and we'll be creating one 2-bedroom unit and one 3-bedroom unit in that existing structure. We are then proposing to build a 2-story structure, which was the structure shown on the first slide, and we'll get back to it again. That will be a 2-story building, approximately 5,700 square feet per floor, so just over 11,000 square foot building. Within that building, we are proposing 10 new units. 6 of them would be 2-bedroom, and 4 of them would be 3-bedroom units. As you know, these projects require that 25% of the projects be affordable to those in the 80% median income area. In this case, there will be 3 affordable units, and we are currently proposing that all 3 of the affordable units would be 3-bedroom. Not only are you required to have at least 10% 3 bedrooms, that is the biggest need we see right now in affordable housing and rentals is 3-bedroom units, family units. So we are proposing that all of our affordables would be 3 bedrooms, although I think the state would require no more than 2. However, because it is a rental project, all 12 units will count towards the town's affordable housing inventory. So you get a good bang for your buck. Every unit will be counted towards your inventory. If we go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So I just wanted to give you a little understanding of the neighborhood and what's there today and why we feel our project will fit well. As you can see, within 300 feet of us, there are currently 4 multifamily units ranging from 3 units, 8, 2, and a larger building which has 32 units. And those are all within 300 feet of us, so there's a significant amount of multifamily in the area. They all average about 11,000 square feet in size. We're right there, a little over 11,000. And currently the density in that area of family units, multifamily units, is about 12 per acre, and that's exactly where we are as well, is pretty much 12 per acre. So we do believe we're in keeping with what's out there today. Next slide, please. Thank you, Paul. I would like to point out that in 2017, when the town last did its housing production plan, that this site was actually listed in the, or there were sites on North Road listed as proprietary sites right across the street from us. So we are in an area of town where I believe the town in doing its housing production plan felt this might be a good area for some additional affordable housing. So we are, you can see in the plan where 39 and I believe 34 and 26 were both identified as priority sites for affordable housing. Just to go back, a little more information on our abutters. We also have a significant amount of commercial and non-residential neighbors within our 300-foot sphere. We've got the bank, Verizon, funeral home, office building, church, and a couple of, there were a couple of church buildings there. So in addition to having multifamily within 300 feet, we also have commercial and non-residential uses within 300 feet. And the next slide gives us just a little understanding of building coverage within that 300-foot perimeter around our project. Just over 49% of that land is covered by buildings, by buildings. Just under 30% is the multifamily buildings that I talked about, and single family makes up about 20% of the building coverage within our 300-foot sphere. So we are dramatically surrounded by multifamily and commercial uses, with single family being the lesser of all of those. And then if we just extend our sphere out a little, 50 feet, You can see that changes dramatically. Now, 65% of the abutters' land is covered by buildings used for commercial and other things, multifamily 20%, and yet at 350 feet, only 15% of the land is utilized essentially for single-family homes. So I think it's rebuttable that this is a single-family neighborhood when in fact it is a multi-use neighborhood. Benefit, you can walk to downtown. Certainly affordable housing proponents will tell you that's a huge factor in affordable housing. People who are able to rent here can literally walk to downtown and to services, which is most important, and probably why the town considered this a priority area for housing. Most of the 40B projects we do, the state wants to see that people aren't out in the woods and there's no public transportation for them to get to things. In this case, it's a very pleasant walk to get there. The site plan, as you can see to the left in the hatch mark, is the existing two-family dwelling, which is intended to stay there, although it will be restored and renovated to house the two units I spoke about earlier. You can see in the blue the proposed structure, building, the multi-unit building we're proposing. Interestingly, and I guess good news, is that this project is not going to require a lot of waivers from your zoning bylaw. Of course, with respect to density, that's a given with affordable housing. But other than that, I believe our lot is only 115 feet short of being a qualifying lot in this area, which requires 40,000 square feet. Other than that, the only other dimensional waiver that I'm aware of at this point is going to be our rear yard setback. Your bylaws currently require 30 feet setback, but as you can see, and if I may approach, you can see why our lot goes significantly back here. We're close to this lot line, so there's where the 10 feet originates, although, approximately half of the building will be more than the 30 feet. Other than that, again, we meet all of your dimensional setbacks, height, FAR, lot coverage, which is very surprising for a 40B project. They usually require many waivers from your bylaw. In fact, we also meet your parking requirement. Your parking requirement requires 2 spots per unit, and we are in fact proposing 24 parking spaces. And we've set the parking spaces back from the street so that we could allow a minimum of a 10-foot buffer zone to Crosby Lane. This is just a quick sketch of what we would propose, but obviously as things progress, we'll come up with a more detailed and, I would assume, nicer landscape plan. But we do think it's important that we shield our parking lot from our neighbors. Of course, from the other street, we're not proposing any parking or egress or access. So essentially what's facing North Road today will remain. And then we'll also be bringing in some new landscaping around that building as well. So if I could, there is the concept plan of the building. As I said, we are in the project eligibility stage here. You will be receiving a letter from MHP soon asking for your comments. And in fact, as part of our discussion tonight, I was wondering if the board might consider moving to allow the chair to actually answer the questions once the MHP letter comes, because you will have had the benefit of this hearing, the comments that you'll hear from the public tonight, and then, of course, I do know some of your departments and boards have commented as well. So, as I said, this meeting would have typically been held just after you received the letter, and then you would have written your comments from that meeting, but in light of the fact that we're here early, and I think you'll be getting the letter soon and have the information to respond, I would ask that perhaps you would consider allowing that to happen without delay once you get the letter and you combine the information. So just food for thought. We can talk about it at the end here. But with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have and to the best of my ability, and I'm here to do that.
Okay, I mean, just so you know, I mean, as I mentioned before, the purpose of this meeting, as you know, is kind of to get the information that we would reply to the MHP letter.
Right.
I don't intend this to be a debate tonight, and we will review the responses that we've gotten, you know, for the public, so they can hear what the various departments have had to say, and gather that information. But I mean, quite frankly, we want to leave all the fun stuff, all the public hearing and the public, you know, detailed information for the zoning board of
Zoning board.
appeals as is their responsibility in issuing a comprehensive permit.
I understand.
So, but given that, does anybody on the board have any questions for Mr.?
So these are questions right now for Mr. DeShane,
Correct,
and we're getting to the department letters later.
correct, yeah. Department,
Can you go ahead?
the department letters are going to be just read. I mean, we're not going to
No, but I have a
respond to
couple
them.
of questions with respect to those two. I don't know if who I should ask, whether I should ask the department head or,
Can we come back to Mr. Duchesne after we hear from the department heads?
they're not here though, I don't think.
Most
right?
of them are not here. I mean,
Most of them had no questions. My questions are mostly around the DPW letter.
okay, do you want
And
to go?
actually in the first responder letters.
Okay, do you want
But
to?
I can start with the presentation if you want.
Do you have specific questions that
I do.
relate to the?
Just a
okay.
couple clarification questions. So the rendering that's actually up on the screen now, we received a package that I think was the submission to the state a couple weeks ago, and this rendering was not in that one. Does the state have this now too? Is that all part, or is this an addendum that's
It
going?
should. And, you know, as we're preparing things like this, we do submit them to the state. They're not a requirement for the project eligibility.
So the
This
other-
is really fodder for the zoning board.
The other rendering that's in the package from 2 weeks ago is still here, but this is what you're envisioning now?
Yes.
Okay. And then I had one of my questions was actually about if you go to the pie charts, where you show the percentage commercial, single-family, multifamily, I had a question on this one about what percentage of that commercial was houses of worship, but from the slide before, it looks like it's about 20% is houses of worship. But then when you extend to 350 abutters, do you know what percentage of that is houses of worship? Because as soon as you do that, that pulls in another church.
I don't have that detail.
Okay,
I'd have to
I was
sit
just
down and
curious how
calculate.
much was like commercial business
Versus churches.
houses of worship, and how much of that additional 15% between the two charts was the other church or other commercial businesses?
I would actually say, given the fact that with the movement out, we went from a total of commercial and other was 49%, and you calculated about 20% of that was houses of worship. I would guess then that, you know, when we go out to the 350 and we're now up at 65%, so it's gone up 15%, probably half of that would be the additional church. I mean, these are
Yeah.
very rough numbers,
Yeah,
but
I'm just curious.
yeah, sure.
If you go to, Paul, I don't know what page it is in the packet. If I look at just the document that was attached to the packet, it's on page 87, but it's right before the evidence of site control 4A. There's a item G, this is in the tabular analysis of zoning conformity. So item G says the minimum rear yard required is 30 feet, and you're
Right.
providing 10. Is that
Correct.
flip-flopped, or is that, am I?
No, that's right.
I'm confused.
We'll be seeking a waiver from the 30 feet.
Okay, that's where your
To
waiver
allow
is.
us to
Okay.
have 10.
Okay,
And again, that is the sole dimensional setback waiver. I mean, I've literally seen pages of waivers on some of these projects. So we've managed to really meet the vast majority of your current zoning regulations.
okay. And then on page 124, it says that one of the units will be made ADA accessible. Is there a requirement for, Paul, is there a requirement around how much of a dwelling needs to be ADA accessible?
Are you aware of a requirement from DHCD on accessibility for?
I'm not, other than certainly if there is on an affordable unit, if there is a person that requires that accessibility, they would be required to provide it.
So would that be one of the affordable units that's ADA accessible, or?
I would assume so, correct.
And I think they have to make them handicap adaptable as well. If the units aren't already accessible, they have to be easily adapted so that if a handicapped person requires that adaptation, that they can, still rent that unit.
Does that, sir, does that just mean that they can get in the building and into the unit itself, or is the unit built?
No, actually, the
Differently.
unit, handicap accessible units have wider doors,
Okay.
wider walkways.
So that's what that's for
That
the
one will
unit
be
itself?
essentially built for handicap accessibility. But as
Okay.
council suggested, typically we will make the other units, what was the term? Adaptable. And what they do is they, for instance, they put extra supports within the walls around the tubs and the toilets so that bar rails and handicap things can be mounted to the walls without having to, rip it all over. And probably larger door frames just to make sure that, there's no question. But as you get your affordable tenants through the lottery or whatever mechanism, as was suggested, if there is a handicap, we have to accommodate.
Yeah, and where my question was coming from, I recognize this is more with the Zoning Board of Appeals. With a new building, it just seems that the building itself should be accessible, at least the first floor. But I appreciate your clarification is that the unit itself would be built for more maneuverability.
As well, yes.
Okay. And then I just had one other clarification. In the packet where it talks about protected land and ecosystems, on page 123, protection of sensitive land, including prime agricultural land, is checked off. What is that protecting in that area? Do you recall?
I do not.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't know, I'm not sure whether this particular parcel is deemed prime agricultural land. In which case we would just show minimization of, impervious surfaces. I didn't check that box, but I will get you an answer for
Okay.
that.
May have been at one time because there was like a farm back there at one time, right? I'm just guessing.
Yeah, I will follow up for you on that.
My other questions, Pat, relate to department letters or
Okay.
process, so I'll
Okay.
just hold them.
All right, anything right now, Aaron? Okay, George, you all set for right now? Okay, so I just want to go through some of the responses that we did receive in regards to this application. DPW had several comments. They want to see, obviously, a full site plan before they can review it for the special permit. They want provisions for an enclosed dumpster, a dumpster pad and a dumpster. They want to clearly show on the plan all existing and proposed utilities. And a note that this section of North Road is proposed for roadway construction in this calendar year, in which case there's a 5-year moratorium before that roadway can be disturbed. So just something to obviously keep in mind as far as road work on North Road. The pavement width on Crosby Lane right now, according to DPW, is 8 feet wide, even though the right-of-way is 30 feet. And then, obviously, this will probably be a ZBA determination that road may have to be modified somewhat. And snow storage location. As far as sewer capacity, I'm sure you're aware of the current sewer moratorium. According to calculations by DPW, there would need to be an on-site treatment system that would be able to handle 2,460 gallons per day of waste. So do you have some questions on those, Virginia?
Yeah, I didn't know if you knew where you stood with respect to the sewer requirements, or if you're going to have to do on-site treatment.
Well,
You have to go to
at
the
this point-
microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me. At this point, again, we're still at the stage of project eligibility. I haven't had a detailed discussion with our engineers regarding sewer capacity, but I think 2,400 gallons per day is not an overly burdensome amount, so.
Okay.
And then, will you need access to, from a construction standpoint, if North Road has a moratorium? Does that provide an issue for you?
Well, I'm gonna have to check. I'm not sure how much road work is proposed in North Road, other than perhaps utilities, but I think most of the work is expected to be on Crosby Lane. That's where our access and egress will be. We won't have a curb cut onto North Road, but that will be one of the first things I talk with our engineers about, is the fact that that is a factor to be considered.
And my other question, Pat, just had to do with the width comments. And there's different comments related to width in the DPW, the police, and the fire.
I didn't notice that.
So I just group them all together when you get done.
Well, if you want to take those now.
I just didn't know if you had a sense for kind of where you stand in terms of how you would respond to the width comments from, have you seen these letters?
No.
Oh,
no,
okay, then I'm sorry,
but
I didn't mean to catch you cold.
I can tell, no, I should have. At this point, I haven't been party to discussions of what improvements would be necessary on Crosby Road. I mean, typically, we have to meet town's public health and safety requirements.
Yeah.
And therefore, if the right-of-way is 30 feet, that gives us ample space to widen the road. Although I would suggest what we would likely have to do would be to widen it from the intersection across the full width of our property, so that, that getting to our entrance and exit would be a much wider road, but we wouldn't necessarily widen Crosby Road, in its entirety or to its end. We'll have to work with your zoning board and with your DPW to come up with what they want for roadway improvements. But you always anticipate if there's going to be any kind of public health or public safety issue, we need to make our egress and access safe. So I would suspect we will be doing something to make that happen.
Paul, is that a conflict that there's 18 feet available for a 30-foot right-of-way?
No, that's fairly common. The paved width is oftentimes significantly less than the right-of-way.
Okay.
Because at the time they laid it out.
You hope it's that way rather than the other.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it.
Okay, do you have anything?
I don't really understand the sewer comments. I mean, we have the letter here from the DPW basically stating that they, based on the number of bedrooms, that their needed sewer capacity would be
Right,
3190
right.
GPD, and they only have 730.
That's all they can use from the town, correct?
Our existing connections.
So they would have to put an on-site treatment system
Correct.
on, right, is my
According to,
understanding.
I mean, that's what they need to work with so Paul Havard, if you want to explain
Do
that.
they have the ability, the space to do that? Or
Well,
I mean,
that's up for the sewer, that's up to the ZBA
Okay.
and them to figure that out. But
Right,
go
so,
ahead.
so just to clarify, because this is a Chapter 40B development, the applicant would have the right to request a waiver of the sewer moratorium, because it's only a local moratorium. It's not something that was imposed by DEP. So then it's going to be up to the board to make sure that it does, significant review of this question and determine whether or not there is actually enough capacity to allow this amount of sewer flow to go into the town sewer without causing any sort of, overflow problems. One of the questions I wanted to ask the applicant is whether or not MHP requires a waiver list as part of the PEL application. Because I know Mass Housing does now require a waiver list to be submitted with the PEL application, but it's been a long time since I've done a Mass Housing.
There is
partnership
a zoning waiver list in the application. I need to check whether it required the
Okay, because I don't see it in
In there?
what was submitted
Okay.
here, yeah.
But is this a zoning waiver? Is sewer considered a zoning waiver? Or is this-
Well, the waivers that the Board of Appeals grants are all local permits, it's not just zoning. So in this instance, a sewer connection is a local permit, so they would have the right to request it. It doesn't mean that the board has to grant it.
The Board of Appeals. yeah.
The Board of Appeals, again, it has to do its review and make sure that there's not going to be any health, safety, or other local concern, that outweighs the regional need for affordable housing as it applies to that request.
Okay. So that's not really consideration for us then.
No, it's definitely something that
I mean,
will
if we have
have
a
to be
letter saying we
resolved.
don't have the capacity.
I mean, that would be in the letter that we would send to MHP, for sure.
Correct.
Right. And then it would go back to the ZBA.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for them to work out, yeah, and for the engineers.
And that's really sort of the point of this process, is for the town to be able to identify to the subsidizing agency what its major concerns are. The subsidizing agency generally is going to take those concerns and regurgitate them back in the project eligibility letter and inform the Board of Appeals, these are issues you need to resolve during your local hearing process.
Okay, all right, so the next response we had was from the police department, and they, as Virginia noted, had a very lengthy discussion about the width of the pavement on the street, but, so I don't need to repeat all that. It is, if you want to find these later, Mr. Duchesne, they are
Oh, yes.
on our website, and I'm sure somebody can provide copies to you. They note the increased traffic that's going to be caused at the intersection with North Road, and basically stating that there's no easy way in and out of Crosby Lane. That's, an issue to be decided. As far as the fire department, they noted the water supply seems to be adequate. The fire apparatus access and turning plan has to be submitted for approval. I'm sure that's not news to you. The building will be protected with a monitored automatic sprinkler system. And obviously, the applicant has to apply to the town of Chelmsford 911 for addresses. And if all those conditions are met, then they said they would not have an issue, but that's the conditions to be met. Building inspector just notes that as you had referenced, the dimensional requirements have to be met, or obviously a waiver for those. The health department reiterates the on-site septic system, which must meet Title V regulations. The water district does not have any comments at this time. And I believe the only other one was Conservation Commission had no concerns on this. I noticed that we do have a member of the Chelmsford Historic District Commission here. Did you have anything you'd like to tell us about, Brenda?
Good evening, Brenda Lovering, 8 Omega Circle, Chelmsford Historic District Commission. This property is in the Historic District, both the home on North Road and the new building that is being proposed on Crosby Lane. And the Historic District is always concerned of the exterior appearance of any building within the district, so that we are closely following. And the plan that I've seen tonight looks acceptable, but I would like to make sure that when we have a final plan, that we also get to review it along with the proper board that is going to be doing the reviewing for this. Any questions?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and I do want to note that today by email, we did receive a letter from an attorney for one of the abutters, and the information that was raised in that letter will also be included in the issues that were in there will be included in the letter to MHP, primarily about the character of the neighborhood and the congestion that it will cause. So given that, if there's anybody here that would like to bring up any issues that have not been brought up already. And I just ask that you be brief and to the point and just raise the issues. Again, this is not a debate tonight, just for us to gather the information about what we need to report to MHP about concerns of the community. So,
Good evening, Attorney James Harrington, and I'm here with my client, Joan Doyle, and Thomas Doyle could not make it tonight. He's home recovering from a surgery, so I'll make this brief. I think a lot of the concerns of the neighbors echo what you've seen in the letters before you, particularly from the police with regard to the safety. The reason why the neighborhood has such a grave concern is there's 5 houses on the street now, and they already have incredible difficulties with traffic as far as if there's a UPS delivery, they have to pull over to make room for a truck to get by. They can't even pass each other on the road as it is now. And even with the widening, it's going to disrupt the character of the neighborhood to a severe detriment to these particular residents on Crosby Lane. So the idea of all of a sudden taking 5 homes and adding another, I thought it was 10, I believe now it's 12 more units, which could be another 24 cars coming in and out of Crosby Lane, was going to create a substantial detriment to the neighborhood that we don't think can be overcome with any reasonable conditions. Never mind the difficulties that they already experience entering and exiting North Road. So I think I'll leave it at that, and I'm fairly certain that this concern here is throughout the entire Crosby Lane. So,
sure. Okay, thank you.
May I ask Mr. DeShane a clarification question on that?
Sure. Doug, we have a clarification question, and then we'll take your comment.
The previous speaker referenced 12 new units. But you're building 10 new
10 new
units,
units.
and there's and the other 2 are from the existing
Yes.
duplex that's there right now,
Right, so it's 10
two-family.
new.
And the 10 are 5, is it 2-story, 5 and 5? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Hi, I'm Colleen Skomas. I live on Crosby Lane. I just want to ask, has anybody been down Crosby Lane? Any of you have checked out this street?
Not yet.
I've been down there a couple of times in the past. not-
Okay, so literally, when I say it is not wide enough for, I have a Tahoe, and one of my neighbors have a Tahoe. We cannot cross each other at the same time. If there is utility work, you have to wait till the utility truck is either gone, or you have to pull into Meeting House Drive and park your car there to access your home. So there is not enough room. There's 5 homes on the street. You're potentially increasing it by 200%. There's 9 children on the street. Safety is a concern. Mr. Hanscom, who rented the property at the front, his last tenants, we had police there, cops there every week because he rented to criminals. Again, the children are on the street. We've had criminals running through my neighbor's yard on her Nest Cam, seeing it. He does not vet people well. So safety is a huge concern. God forbid there's a fire there. There's a couple fire trucks, and one of my kids has a medical emergency, and nobody can get to it because the road's not big enough. So who's going to be responsible if something happens? That's my question.
Okay, I mean, we can't answer that question.
No,
right
I know,
now.
but that is the question I think all of us
Sure.
have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, is anyone else? Okay, thank you.
You do have on the Zoom call, you do have a butter who wants to
Okay.
speak to the board. It's a Jeanette and Eric Holmberg. Jeanette and Eric, if you want to turn your camera on and speak, you'll be recognized.
We actually have nothing to add at this time. So thank you.
All right,
Okay,
didn't
thank you.
want to forget you. You've
That
been
was
on, you've been
easy.
hanging on for quite some time there.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, is that it from Zoom?
Yes, that's it.
Okay. All right, so thank you very much. We will work on creating this letter and consider what you had proposed, Mr. DeShane, and at our next meeting, hopefully that letter will be drafted anyway, and we can review it before submission, and that still, even if we get that letter from MHP and then, this week or whatever, we'll still be within our 30-day.
Of course, yep. And if you have any further questions or need any information, I believe you know how to reach me.
Yes.
May I ask a couple general questions?
Okay,
I
we have
just
a couple of
couple-
general questions.
So in our packet, maybe this is for Paul or Paul Haverty, there was a Chapter 3 summary, and it talks about the local comment period and the subsidizing agency doing a site visit.
Mhm.
We're not expected to be, that's for the state doing the
But
site
they
visit.
will let us
You
know
will be
when it
invited
is.
to the site
Yeah,
We'll
visit.
so
be
we can
invited to
go,
that,
yeah.
okay. And then the letter that Pat referenced that we got today made some other assertions about what the board could do in terms of zoning initiatives and things like that, and I was just wondering, could we get an opinion from council on that, just to, not that I
Well,
think we should be taking
I
that
don't think,
on.
I don't think tonight.
No, not
yeah.
tonight, just
At some
separate.
point.
It
Sure, I
really
mean,
doesn't
it is-
impact this
Right.
at all, but, and then, Paul, did you have anything else based on your experience? Paul Cohen?
Oh, no,
Or Paul
no,
Haverty?
no.
Okay.
And I didn't either. I asked the questions that I needed to ask.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, unless you need me for anything else?
I think we're all set with you. Thanks for coming, Paul.
Take care.
All right, next on our agenda is our policies. Again. So the first one is the one that was referenced by a member of the public during our public input period about the alcohol beverage licenses. We talked about this at, say that again.
He's saying louder.
Louder? You can't hear me?
No.
Okay. All right, if
Harrison,
somebody
can you
could get
grab
that
the door?
door.
Just close the door.
Yeah.
It's got it.
Okay.
Thanks, Harrison. Okay, so the first one is the change for the requirement to hold over a public hearing on an alcohol license to a second meeting. We had talked about that at our last meeting. I think it was agreed that it was not necessary, that we still have the option to continue a hearing if we need to. We could continue it longer than 2 meetings if we need to, as we've done for other things besides alcohol licenses, like poll petitions. So unless anybody has any other changes they'd like to make to the changes that were made to that policy, we could take a vote to implement it. Any comments?
No. I think either way you write it, it's board discretion, and this
Yeah.
exercises the discretion as the exception rather than the rule, so.
So can we have a motion?
I will make a motion to approve the update to policy 3-2, approval of new or transferred alcohol beverage licenses as presented.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. And then the second one is my third try at the draft policy for monuments and memorials, just eliminated the creation of a civic committee and kind of put everything into this policy. I also did make some changes to the form itself, per your suggestion, Virginia, about adding all the different criteria that we would look at, and to be sure that they are referenced at some point in the form. And I kind of went back and forth about whether it should be 2 members of the board that be assigned to do the initial review of these applications, or 1 person. The issue when you have 2 is it's considered a subcommittee, and then they have to post their meetings, and they have to keep minutes and all that other stuff. So I thought if it were just 1 person that would be designated as the primary point of contact, that might make the process move more smoothly, I think, on everybody's perspective. So I don't know what.
And so then their role would be more to just make sure everything is complete, and then it would come to the board for adjudication.
Right, and that one designee might help the person.
Suggestions,
Yeah,
or, yeah.
right, exactly. Help them move it along and maybe give them a sense if it's not going to pass, so that something like that, that the proponent doesn't come up and expect it to pass and then have it not be ready to, for whatever reason. So,
I think it looks good.
okay, so do you want to hold this over to the next meeting, or are we okay for approving it now? It is the third time that we've talked about it, so.
I think it's okay. Do we have to decide who the person is?
No, that would, I think it says that when liaisons are appointed, that person would be appointed at that point. I mean, maybe if we need something in the next 2 months,
Yeah, we
I
can
guess
just-
I could do it or something.
As long as you just don't have to name somebody just for the sake of naming somebody else.
Right, exactly. I mean, that's a good point. It could be on a case-by-case basis, right? So,
Okay, you want me to, and this is gonna get a number somewhere?
correct, yep. Yeah, I'll work with
Christine?
Christina about where to put it, yeah.
I will make a motion to accept the draft policy for monuments and memorials and the accompanying recognition request for monuments and memorials as presented.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right. Okay, next up is signing the election warrant for the March 5th presidential primary. It's pretty straightforward. I don't know if anybody has any questions.
I will make a motion that the select board sign the warrant for the March 5th, 2024 presidential primary as presented.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Alrighty. Next is the submission to the MSBA for a statement of interest for the South Row. So, Paul, if you want.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And on behalf of Dr. Lang, I want to express his sorry that he could not be here this evening. He was scheduled to be on our agenda this evening, but due to the impending weather, his travel arrangements were altered, and so he was unable to be here this evening. But I did attend the school committee meeting last week where this was presented to the school committee. The school committee approved the request. What this is a request to submit on behalf of the town of Chelmsford a submission to the Massachusetts School Building Authority, a statement of interest for under their accelerated repair program. And the deadline is March 1st, and the purpose of this would be to repair a portion of the South Road School roof. The South Road School roof was recognized during our recent capital planning process as in need of replacement because sections of the roof are 25 years old and another section is over 32 years old. So there's 3 sections that require replacement. And the Public Works Director, Christine Clancy, and the engineers determined a cost estimate of roughly $1.2 million for this project, which included the removal and restoration of the solar array that's on the portion of the building. Why the town chooses to do this is if we are approved, then we would receive a 50% reimbursement for this roof project. If we don't do it, we still have to repair the roof, and because it's at an aged condition. So the school committee, as I mentioned, unanimously approved it last Tuesday, and upon your vote of authorization this evening, Dr. Lang will submit this on behalf of the town to the MSBA, and then we would anticipate an answer probably by fall for consideration either at fall town meeting or next spring town meeting for the town's contribution to this. And then obviously the work would take place no sooner than the summer of 2025. So again, this is basically almost like a grant application. It's a statement of interest in order to receive approximately 50% reimbursement on the project cost.
So is this a competitive?
Yes, it's competitive, and part of the competition on it is, the criteria of the state is the roof has to be at least 25 years old, which we do here. And obviously, they have a funding limitation in what they call the accelerated repair program. So it's separate from the new school facility program. And they typically look at roofs, and so they also traditionally would look at HVAC systems, but they have that on hold this year because they're evaluating the energy criteria that they want to use in the future. But yes, we will be competing with other municipalities across the Commonwealth. So it's kind of like the lottery. If you don't submit, you don't have a chance to win. But the goal would be to submit the request, and hopefully the project gets approved because, again, that portion of the roof at South Road does need to be replaced.
Okay, any other questions about this, this vote that we need to take?
Do we need to read this as the vote?
You can just say
We're gonna
you
vote to
recommend the vote. You
authorize?
can recommend the authorization as presented. Yeah.
I will make a motion that the board recommend the authorization of the superintendent to submit to the Massachusetts School Building Authority the statement of interest form for the replacement of the South Row Elementary School roof as presented.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? None. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The next item I have two bid awards this evening on public works projects. The first one is for the Chelmsford High School tennis athletic court renovations. The bid opening was back on January 25th. There were two responsive bidders to the project, and the recommendation to submit is to the lowest bid, which was the lowest qualified bid of $1.36 million to Classic Turf Company. The effort is to have that work done this summer over at the high school. And again, we have good references and direct experience with this vendor. And if we do both or one, how do you want to do that?
I can do it.
Okay, good.
I will make a motion to approve the CHS Tennis Athletic Court renovations be awarded to Classic Turf in the amount of $1,360,000 as presented.
Second the motion.
Okay, a motion and a second. Any further questions? If not, all in favor?
Great, thank you. And then the second bid is for tree contractor for the upcoming season. Again, bids were issued and they were opened on February 1st. In this case, we had 5 bidders respond to the project, and the recommendation is to award to the lowest responsive bidder and responsible bidder, which is Mayer Tree, in the amount of $113,210. And again, in this case, again, the DPW contracted with this company this past year and had no issues. The company is well managed, and so this plan is to accept their bid, for the upcoming year, since you can see it was a very competitive bidding situation. They were just over $113,000, and then you had a bid at $114,600 and a bid at $115,550. So again, the bid seems competitive with the market.
Okay, any questions about this bid?
I'll make a motion to award the to authorize award of the tree contractor bid to Mayer Tree in the amount of $113,210 as presented.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I just have a report this evening. In your packet, you have the draft warrant for the 2024 spring annual town meeting. At your next meeting in 2 weeks from tonight, on the 26th, you'll be signing the warrant for the spring annual town. This draft is identical as what I provided for you at your last meeting, so there's no change. There have been no changes, and I'm not aware of any changes in the next 2 weeks before you receive it and act upon it at your next meeting. What I am waiting for is the legal review from council in terms of the final form of the MBTA zoning bylaw, which Attorney Haverty is working on with the Community Development Director Evan Belansky and the Planning Board, and then just his review of the language on the warrant. But it's pretty boilerplate, so I think what you see this evening will be closely mirror what the final version that you'll be considering and signing at your next meeting in 2 weeks from tonight.
Hey, Paul?
Yes.
I was thinking about, you said that no matter what happens, you're going to do the MBTA articles on the beginning of the second
Yeah, that would be
night.
the recommendation, yeah.
And so at town meeting, typically attendance wanes on the second night,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm wondering if it would be worth like a early communication to the town meeting reps to say, this is what we're going to do, just so you can plan accordingly and be there, and then maybe send it out again after the election where there's new town meeting reps and as a reminder to the current ones.
Okay. The reason I wouldn't do it on the, I'm not suggesting you.
No, I
but
agree-
just
I
want you to
agree with the
explain. Yeah.
approach,
Okay, no, but I
absolutely,
want to
but I
explain, for
just-
people wondering, well, if it's so important,
Yeah.
the town charter speaks to the primary purpose of spring town meeting being for the
Mm.
consideration of budget and the finance of the town. Because if it were not the case, then I know Virginia, the board understands, I just want the community to do it, but that's a good point, and.
Because this is an unusual
if you can-
circumstance, and maybe
because
we
the-
ought to just give
right.
people a heads up.
In
This is
fact, there's a
important.
letter that usually goes out from the clerk's office, and I think we can get that in there about notifying them of the second session. Okay, so I will do that I'll communicate that in the clerk's letter to have that bold and pointed out, but thank you, that's a good suggestion. The next item I have to report is a grant award, and this was awarded to the town of Chelmsford by the state, let's see, fiscal year '24 firefighter safety equipment grant award. The town of Chelmsford received $24,635.97. And that was, again, submitted by Chief Ryan on behalf of the department. And I just wanted to point out that what that will provide the town is a mobile command accountability board, 13 Scott air cylinders to replace the self-contained breathing apparatus bottles that are expiring, and then a gear for the dryer for the gear dryer for the to replace the existing one at the fire headquarters that's 25 years old and can't get replacement parts. So again, I want to recognize the grant by the state and also the efforts by Chief Ryan and the fire department to obtain this grant award for necessary equipment. And then the next item on my report is the state operating budget earmark requests. And I don't have any handout on this, and it's because this is sort of just came in last week. As I was finalizing the agenda, I received a call from Representative Cataldo's office. I spoke to him briefly on the phone, and then I spoke to Representative Elliott this morning about earmarks. And I said, gee, it's kind of early, but here's where we are. And again, I'm not asking for any action this evening, but the question is how much, if any, earmarks will be provided given the state's budget situation. But they are in discussions with the legislative leadership because the governor has submitted her budget and the House budget, which is scheduled to come out in the beginning of April. So those discussions are going on internally. So what I can do is put this on a next agenda item to formally communicate. The one idea that I would ask you to consider over that time and to think about, the one key thing is that I think would be appropriate and serves not only Chelmsford but the community region is the replacement of the food pantry trailer in the back of this building here. For two reasons. One is the age and condition of the trailer behind the town offices is nearing the end of its useful life. And second, we've heard from the food pantry, it's no longer large enough to accommodate the demand that, as you know, has been increasing because of the conditions out there. And so the idea would be to receive a slightly larger trailer, modern, and the appropriate shelving, handicapped accessibility ramp, and so forth. In speaking to Public Works Director Christine Clancy, she thinks the cost of that is approximately $90,000. And again, so that may be an earmark suggestion. In the past, again, just to remind the board, one of the other earmarks that the town has received annually has been for food security for seniors. And that amount can vary. It's been $25,000 or so. Other items to think about in the weeks ahead, would be we're obviously trying to advance energy, green energy efforts such as rapid electric charging stations is on the town's capital plan, and those are obviously could be placed anywhere in the town, from the libraries to Vinyl Square and so forth. And then when I did speak to Representative Elliott today, one of the items that he raised as a possibility would be tree planting, again, as part of this global warming and heating issues. And there is a section of his district, which is up near the Vinyl Square area, which qualifies as a community area that would be eligible for those types of earmarks and funding, under social equity. So again, those are some thoughts. Again, I'm not asking for a vote this evening, but this sort of got put on the agenda. Normally we have this every year on our agenda, but usually it's a little bit later than early February. But I just wanted to bring this to the board's attention and again, if anybody watching has any suggestions, obviously I think we'd welcome those as well. But again, the big question is going to be what amount of funding, if any, but the sense is it would be less than in recent years. And I do recall that several years ago there were no earmarks in the state budget, and so we don't know where it's going at this point. So that's the matter on that, and that sort of brings me to the final presentation, and it's going to be a little lengthier than the notes I just gave you under my report, but reflecting on the budget that I presented to you at the last meeting in January, and then I'll see what's going on around us, and is that we're in sort of a unusual budgetary period. You may have seen the story in the Lowell Sun yesterday about the town of Drake's financial struggles, that they were looking at about a $2 million deficit, which again, they haven't had to confront in recent years. You may have heard about the town of Westford, which is struggling with determining the amount of an override. And when we were at the Neshoba Tech Breakfast, we heard from Superintendent Denise Pidgeon that many of her communities were contemplating overrides and struggles. Certainly people may have heard recently about the budget cuts that are being contemplated in Andover, the difficulties that recently arose with the financing in the town of Newton. And when I reflected upon the budget presentation that I provided 2 weeks ago, I think one of the things that may not have been as clear was, well, what are we looking at? And so all that into consideration, I developed a 3-year financial outlook because I wanted to perhaps maybe more emphasize some issues that I think raised in that, but also sort of ring the bell early in terms of the concerns. The challenges that we're going to have beyond the current town meeting and the current budget that we'll be working on over the next several months is towards the future is how do we address the funding challenges given the realities of what we're in right now. And the realities of what we're in right now is we've got the state having failed its revenue targets for 7 consecutive months, coming out of a period where there was an unusual amount of high inflation, which cities and towns are now dealing with. And the challenge is we've heard that and we know that the state passed the fair share tax or the millionaire's tax, whatever you want to call it, that was to provide funding for education and transportation. However, to date, we've seen no additional funding beyond the called for funding levels that were provided for under the Student Opportunities Act, which was enacted years prior and still has a couple of years to go. So a long-winded way of saying, if the town's constrained by Proposition 2.5, which worked during a period of 2% inflation, which is obviously the Fed's target, and has worked for the past couple of decades, and we're coming out of a period where there was over 6% inflation, and we're still at 3% inflation, the problem is the math doesn't work. And that's the challenge. And for example, in this year's state budget, the town's funding level from the governor for net state aid was 1.64%. So when you're getting 1.64% in net state aid in Chelmsford and you're constrained by 2.5%, well, then how do you meet the challenges of health insurance premiums that are double those levels, we know from the retirement board that their traditional level continues at 6.5%. We know that, employees are seeking to catch up to the inflation that we've had in terms of labor adjustments that are more than 2.5%. And that sort of brings the stability into question. So again, I'll go through this quickly. I'm not going to read all the slides, but where we are with our labor agreements is at the end of the upcoming fiscal year, which we budgeted for, all the agreements have expired. And so when we sit, for example, this December, which is 10 months from now, and do the tri-board meeting with the school committee and the select board and the finance committee, we will then have to, as we have in the past, have an executive session with the select board and school committee and talk about, well, what funding do we provide in the school department budget to fund labor agreements, because those agreements don't go to town meeting. We also have a backlog, as we've discussed with the capital, that there's capital projects, that are worthy and considerable, including one we talked about tonight in terms of roof at South Row School and so forth, McCarthy tennis courts and others that are there, and others in the future. And then, so how I did the analysis and why I took 21 slides is I could have just done it on the page, just saying, 2% doesn't go into 4, or whatever analysis you want to have. But what I did is I looked at the budget drivers and the revenue sources from the budget that I just completed and what the town traditionally has. And then I sort of then extrapolated out beyond the upcoming fiscal year to give a sense and also to explain what the challenge is. So again, I'm not going to go through it repeatedly, but we know our big drivers are school department, health insurance, retirement system, employee compensation for the general government, solid waste, recycling, Neshoba Tech, our debt service, Medicare tax, and property and casualty insurance. And you may recall from Dr. Lang's presentation back in December at the tri-board meeting that the big driving part for his operating budget is labor, obviously, because they're a school, they educate children, and so you can see that, their costs are almost $2.5 million to provide a 2.5% COLA plus step increases, lane changes, retirement incentives. So again, what I did is I looked back over 3 years, and why do I do 3 years is, one, it's a good period back and a good period forward, but it also generally goes through a labor cycle. And what does that mean? Oftentimes, as we've seen in other communities and in Chelmsford, you don't settle a labor contract in a particular fiscal year on time. So the true measure of it would be to look over a 3-year cycle, because that is the period of time. So again, you look, probably the most notable thing is what's the dollar increase and what's the percentage increase. And then I try to then extrapolate forward into fiscal years 26, 27, and 28, if you then look at what would be, a reasonable funding level. And you can see, obviously, it goes up for the school department by over 5%. The health insurance, you're up over 7%. Now, that's not only because you got premiums that are increasing at 6 or 7%, but we're also, as we know, have an increasing amount of retirees, and in some cases, active employees taking the benefit. Same thing with the retirement system. Again, their guidance is 6.5%, but again, that goes up more than 6.5% because you have, as we've seen, growing number of retirees. Again, general government, again, that's going to be affected by the labor market conditions, but you're somewhere around 5%. Solid waste and recycling, we have those contracts in place, so we know what our tipping fees cost, what our collection costs are to bring them either to the recycling centers or to the tipping station for the waste energy plant, and we know that that's around over 3%. Same with Neshoba Tech. Again, we look at historic and what's going on. That varies, as we know, annually based upon our enrollment. So in one year, we almost had a 0% change because our enrollment didn't change relative to the district. This past upcoming year, we saw it go up by 4.6% because we sent more students, and other than Townsend, we were the second largest percentage change. So again, I'm using around 4%, looking at that level. Getting debt service, again, that's impacted by interest rates, what you're going to borrow at, and obviously, if interest rates decline, that will provide some assistance, but we've obviously are impacted by interest rates. Medicare tax, that's directly from your payroll, so that's going to go up because your Medicare tax is a direct tax on payroll. And same thing with property and casualty, like anybody else. You're seeing property insurance increases, 6% or so going forward. So when you drive it all up, you're around 7.8 or $8 million, driving it forward. When you then look at the revenue sources in the budget, you're allowed 2.5% increase, your projected new growth, any excess levy capacity, which is really none because we're at the levy limit, and then your increases in state aid. You start pulling those things into individuals. On the property tax, the 2.5% is a mathematical thing. You can figure that one out, and that's the column. It's just over $3 million for the upcoming year, and then it grows slightly thereafter. And then new growth, I'm trying to account for the permits that have just been issued for the West Campus development, the 400 housing units that are over there. What I don't have is the phasing. In other words, what is their schedule? They pulled the permits for the entire project, but what is their schedule for completing that project over phases? So I took a reasonable guess of $2 million of new growth. Again, I look back, the last few years, we were at 1.7. For the upcoming year, we were 1.5 before, 1.7 before that. And then I went back to when the heyday, when they were building the units on, multifamily units over on Turnpike Road, and I think the 2 million is as good a number as any at this point in time. So again, that provides you with about 4% increase in property tax. State aid, I think 3% is as good as any number, barring anything unforeseen, because they generally tend to provide the state aid with the growth in the state budget. 3% is probably realistic. Local receipts, again, looking at historically and what's out there, 3% also makes about sense. When you look at the motor vehicle excise tax trends, which is our largest local receipt, and meals tax and rooms and so forth. So then you sum all that up and you're around $6 million of revenue estimate. So again, 8 minus 6, you're at $1.8 million shortfall. In 26, 2 million and 2.3. But the thing to point out is the reason we don't have that this current year is for the upcoming FY25 budget is the budget year that we're in right now, we received the extraordinary one-time increase of over $2.1 million in Chapter 70 aid that is not expected in the future. And again, this chart probably tells it best. That's what avoided the problem this year is you can see we're getting, increases of Chapter 70 education funding of 1.25, 1.2, 1.38, and then all of a sudden you get 18.2 or $2.2 million, and then it drops down to the current year at 1.9% of $279,000 or a tenth of that money. That's exactly what happened in Drake right now, and for their 25 number, and basically we don't see any evidence of any change in that because it does account, even though we have enrollment growth at the Chelmsford Public Schools and at Neshoba Tech. So that's the anomaly. So why aren't we immediately facing the problem that Westford and Drake and others are facing right now? It's because of that anomaly for the current fiscal year, at which we basically, didn't overextend ourselves, and therefore, it's enabled us to balance it at this point. So that's the message of how we're going to, look to the future. And then the question is, well, what are you doing about it? There's a couple things. I personally, and I think I may have mentioned to the board, I am examining every position that becomes open. And in case, as the board knows, we had a municipal safety specialist position that unexpectedly arose. I've not filled that position. I've also talked to some department heads about anticipated retirements and succession planning. And in one instance, I basically told the person that I don't anticipate, if there's a succession effort, that I would fill the assistant position, and so forth. In other words, I'm trying to look, because the last thing I want to do, or the last thing you want to put an employee through is hire somebody and then 9 months later you're letting them go. Because one is, it's not fair to the other department. It's not fair to the employee. I can't in good conscience hire an employee with the expectation is, oh, well, in 9 months, your position may be on the chopping block. Also, it's not fair to the department operations, the disruptions, so it just trying to do the right thing there. I think the other thing we need to look at in the town, and I know it's not fun and it's not going to be warmly received, we also got to look at our permit levels and so forth. And for example, and I'll just mention it because it pertains to this board, but as you know, there have been revenue studies in the past and so forth. But, I mean, I've sat with this board for, my 17th year. I don't think we've ever adjusted liquor licenses. And again, I know businesses are struggling, and we dealt with that during the pandemic when we reduced fees and so forth. But when you look at what's out there, maybe it's something to look at is it time to adjust the town's license fees? Because certainly the holder of those licenses are adjusting what they're charging, and I think it's something that we'd have to look at. So that's another thing we have to look at going forward. And I think the bigger major effort, again, as we look around the margins, is I think we've got to continue to press upon the legislature, and we've seen the Municipal Association do it and others, that, we need more support from the state, because, because the consequences are being felt in the cities and towns, that if one of our priorities as a Commonwealth is our education system, now all the federal money's gone, and we were fortunate that we didn't overextend ourselves by funding ongoing positions with one-time monies. But I think there has to be some support from the state to recognize the new environment of inflation that has reset everybody, including including labor, including capital construction, and capital improvements, and just overall costs. And so I think that's sort of, again, not looking for immediate action this evening, but I wanted to take the time, and I will be speaking to the Finance Committee on Thursday, the same message, that I just think we need to be looking a little beyond just the year ahead as we're considering our process. So I just thank you for your time, and I thought it was important, and I did, before I put this on the agenda, I did share with the chair that I thought this was an important effort. And again, I'm not looking for any answers this evening, but I just think it's something that we've got to be mindful of, because it's horrible. No one envies going through this, but unless things change, all communities are going to deal with it. And so again, I thank you for your time this evening. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Any comments on what Paul just presented? I mean, it's definitely food for thought.
Yeah, the licensing is interesting.
Yeah,
maybe we could just add that to some future agenda.
Or
and
other ways to
looking at it.
generate revenue. I mean,
Yeah.
the governor indicated that they might give us some additional ways to do that. I don't know how successful they'll be, but something to look at. Okay, thank you. Okay, meeting minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes this evening. Any edits, corrections? Okay, go ahead.
I'll make a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes of January 22nd, 2024, and the regular meeting minutes of January 29th, 2024 as presented.
I'll second the motion.
I have a motion and a second, all in favor? Okay, 4-0, okay. Liaison reports. George, you have anything this evening? No. Aaron?
So the Conservation Commission just wanted me to report that they're making progress with the Land Trust on the Warren Pool Conservation Restriction. And they're just working through the details of how to protect the wet meadow at the site, which is something both parties want to do, and they're making some progress on figuring out the best way to do that. And also, just an FYI, the commission is also reviewing the memorandums of understanding with its partners for managing conservation sites in town. A lot of them are several years old and just need to be reviewed periodically and kept up to date. And they don't really anticipate any significant changes. And then my only other thought, kind of going back to the public input, is I don't know if we need to revisit our discussion about the public input. I thought the 3 minutes was like a guide. We took it out of the policy when we had council helping us with that. So I don't know, it's more of it's like apply a discretion type thing. If somebody makes the point to come, I understand, like, we've had issues where people just go on and on and on, and we have to kind of rein it in.
Right.
And I think that 3 minutes also originated when town meetings started putting in the 3-minute requirement for debate, which was preceded by untimed questions. So,
Well,
I don't know, I don't know if we need to
Revisit.
look at the policy or what, but
Okay,
just a thought.
well, yeah, there is no time in the policy, you're correct. And I think it's kind of at the chair's discretion what they can set, because a couple of
And
meetings ago.
I get you're trying to be consistent with the people coming up.
On each day, right. Like
Yeah.
if I would have not said anything to Brian, I would have let John go on forever too.
Yeah.
And we'd probably still. So, yeah, I mean, that's
Well,
all I'm trying to do.
Yeah, but then I was also thinking, like, there was another topic that one of the speakers came with, and we don't even know what it was, because like we said, the 3 minutes is up, so.
Yeah, but if he has one, then he has another, and, you know.
But I went back there, well, while we were meeting, I went back and looked at the policy, and we did take the time limit out.
Right. I mean, I don't,
So-
yeah, I mean, I think it's okay not to have it, because if there is, you know, I mean, if whoever's the chair wants to let somebody go longer, that's.
And I totally agree with you, Pat. There's times when you just have to rein it in and say, wrap it up.
And quite frankly, I
But I think
expected.
that should
But
be more
but I don't-
discretionary,
yeah.
Yeah, I
depending
mean,
if you,
right.
if you're
I hate to
somebody's
cut
making
people off
sense
who made
and
the
you're
trip
getting
to
somewhere
come,
with
you
it,
know?
continue
have
it while everybody's, on board with it.
Do we have any verbiage in there? Was that
We
about
used
the
to,
3
it
minutes
used
out?
to, and when we updated the policies, we went through, we took it out.
But do we need to maybe
Well,
say
well, I
like
think
at the chair's
I say
discretion?
no.
Do we need to
I-
indicate
It says
that?
something like that in there,
Right,
it's
okay,
at the
it does. So we
discretion.
do have some
Right,
Yeah.
and I think that's,
Discretionary.
yeah, and I think that's, where it should stay,
Well,
quite frankly.
I don't want to, I mean, I just brought it up whether it should be an agenda topic, but I think we just covered it, so.
It should be. I mean, I think subconsciously, we all, we have, this guy's gonna go on forever and not gonna make any sense. You know what I mean? It just, unfortunately, that's just the way it
Yeah.
it
Well,
is.
and-
Depending on the
Because,
topic
you
and the
know,
number of speakers.
But
And-
sometimes
And
if,
it is,
if
it's
we're
a-
getting somewhere with it, you
It's a
just let it go.
discretion thing.
Yeah.
It's-
And,
it's
and I,
just-
and I will say, tonight, I totally expected this meeting to go longer than this. I thought with a couple of topics that we had on the agenda tonight,
Yeah,
that
and I-
it would go longer, so that's why I wanted to be sure that
Yeah.
I had that time limit.
Yeah, like if we have something come up where you're gonna have 20 people line up to speak, then you wanna keep that
Yeah.
time frame in mind. Whereas if you
We
only have
also
one
don't know
person,
what the
maybe it's not.
urgency is of anything somebody's going to bring forward, because we don't know what they're bringing forward, because it's not on the agenda.
And,
So
and if there is something urgent, they can, call
Put
either
it
Paul or
first.
myself and put it on the agenda, yeah.
Yeah,
Like, like has been done before.
yeah.
So do you have any comments, Paul?
No, other than what may have helped would be if you get up there and said, I'd like to talk to the board about these 3 items. Then at least you would know what the 3 items were, whereas
Yeah.
it was sort of like, well,
I've got
this is the
3
2
things.
amount of time, I can't tell you what the third one was. And I think that may have made things a little, may have given the board a little more latitude as a chair, saying, okay, make sure you have enough time to get to your third item, or we'll extend. for that.
Hindsight is wonderful. I just
Right.
found
No, but I'm
myself
just talking in
halfway
general.
through the meeting wondering what the
No, but-
third one was.
Right, exactly, but that's what I'm saying, I think it would have been helpful if
But-
if you're gonna come in, you should tell your audience at the beginning what you're gonna tell them.
But if you give them plenty of time when their time is coming up, they
Right.
can
Right.
make that decision.
Yeah.
Maybe they didn't want to because
Right.
they think that they're gonna be able to go to their third item.
Yeah.
So, anyway, that's my defense.
Okay.
I just don't want to discourage other people from coming up in the future.
Sure.
That think if I'm going to go, I'm going to be able to talk 3 minutes, and we're not going to go waste, 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah, I mean, and it's good that we have it at the beginning so that they can come and have their 3 minutes and then they can go home or wait, whatever they choose
Most
to
of the time,
do.
if people come and they come to the meeting to have to be heard,
Right.
they usually get, pretty good reason, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? So that's why I think a little bit more latitude, discretion.
I mean, quite frankly, both speakers went.
I thought the
Beyond
second
3
speaker went
minutes.
on, and he probably
Yeah,
still be
right,
speaking
yeah.
if he wasn't shut up. I'd forget his name, but.
And I just forgot to mention, and Paul alluded to it, Finance Committee is starting their,
Hearings, meetings,
yeah,
meetings, yeah.
budget review meetings this Thursday, and then that will go into meetings reviewing the town meeting warrants later in the quarter.
Guys, there's 2 finance committee spots open. Did we have people?
No, there's one open now, there's one that's gonna be opening probably after the Springtown meeting. Yeah, John Tebow resigned, so that's the current vacancy, and then another member is expected to step down in May. So that's why he's out looking for two people.
Who resigned?
John Tebow
Oh, okay.
from the Finance Committee.
Oh, okay.
And then, you know,
I
no,
was wondering
yeah.
who it was that was leaving.
Okay, I don't think
Sorry.
that's.
Yeah. No, but it is what-
Yeah.
just-
Sorry.
yeah.
No, sorry, I digress.
Yeah, you do.
Listen,
10
Pat,
seconds.
I haven't done my liaison reports yet.
Shut me down.
I'm done.
Okay. All right. I just have two things this evening. First was a ribbon cutting that we did a couple of weeks ago at the Marco Family Foundation, which is significantly funded by the Sterling Corporation, benefits children and families in need. So, wonderful foundation that they have just kicked off their grant submissions. And the library now has the one book for this year. It is called The Kind Worth Killing. And it is written by Peter Swanson. And he will be here on April 28th to speak about his book, The Kind Worth Killing. I told that to somebody, and they said, well, I don't know if I would pick a title with the word killing in the middle of it to have it be a one book. But then I also noticed that this author has done, I don't know if I'm assuming it was a later book, or maybe it wasn't really one, called The Kind Worth Saving. So, interesting. And I have read the book. It's an interesting read, and it's a pretty easy read, so pick one up at the library and see if you like it.
I think we should all read it. Maybe we could get out of here at 7 instead of 8.
Maybe. All right, that's all I have for this evening, so we'll take another motion.
It's 8 o'clock, and I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor? Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Well,